Remember when buying something meant you actually owned it? You bought a movie. You owned the DVD. You bought Microsoft Office. It was yours. You bought Photoshop. Now, you rent your music. You rent your movies. You rent your software. You rent your cloud storage. At this rate, I'm half expecting my refrigerator to ask me for a monthly subscription before it lets me open the door. And here's the strange part. Most people think subscriptions are saving them money. They're not. They're quietly changing the way your brain thinks about spending, because the biggest expense in your life probably isn't your rent, or your car, or even your student loans. It's something much smaller, something you barely notice. A few dollars here, $10 there, $15 next week. Individually, they're harmless. Together, they're becoming one of the greatest wealth transfers in modern history. And the companies behind it, they absolutely love it, because once you understand how the subscription economy actually works, you'll never look at that little $9.99 per month button the same way again. If you asked someone in the early 2000s how many monthly subscriptions they had, the answer was probably 1, maybe 2, cable TV, and a phone bill. That was about it. Fast forward to today, Netflix, Spotify, Amazon Prime, Google One, Adobe, Xbox, Game Pass, fitness apps, meditation apps. Even your toothbrush has a subscription now, which is honestly more concerning than funny. Somewhere along the way, buying quietly disappeared, and renting became normal. But here's what's fascinating. This didn't happen because consumers suddenly woke up one morning and said, "You know what? I'd really love another monthly bill." No. Companies changed first, and consumers slowly adapted. Because businesses discovered something that completely changed capitalism forever. Imagine you're running a coffee shop. One customer buys a coffee every few weeks. Another signs a contract promising to buy one every single day for the next year. Which customer would you rather have? Exactly. Businesses don't just want customers anymore, they want predictable customers, because predictable customers create predictable revenue. And Wall Street absolutely loves predictable revenue. A company that earns money once is nice. A company that earns money every month is worth billions. That's why investors often value subscription businesses far higher than traditional businesses with similar profits. Not because they're necessarily better, but because they make future revenue easier to predict. And in finance, certainty is expensive. Uncertainty isn't, which is why nearly every industry started asking the same question. How do we turn a one-time purchase into a lifetime payment? And once someone figured out the answer, there was no going back. But here's where things get really interesting. Because subscriptions aren't successful simply because they're cheap. They're successful because your brain processes them differently. And once you understand that little psychological trick, you'll realize why canceling a $12 subscription somehow feels harder than buying a $500 phone. That's where the real story begins. Here's a quick question. Would you hand a stranger $120 for an app you've never used before? Probably not. Now let me ask the exact same question differently. Would you pay $9.99 a month? Suddenly, it doesn't sound nearly as painful. It's the exact same amount of money. Your brain just doesn't treat it that way. Behavioral economists call this payment framing. The smaller and more frequent a payment appears, the less emotionally painful it feels. Your wallet knows it's the same money, your brain, not so much. It's like cutting a pizza into 12 slices instead of 4. You didn't get more pizza. It just looks like you did. Subscriptions work the same way. Companies don't sell you the total price. They sell you the monthly feeling. And feelings are much easier to buy than math. Now think about your own subscriptions. Netflix, Spotify, cloud storage, fitness apps. None of them seem expensive. Individually, they're practically invisible. But here's where it starts to add up. Imagine someone has just 8 subscriptions averaging $15 per month. That's $120 every month. Around $1,440 every year. Now stretch that over 10 years. Ignoring inflation, ignoring price increases. That's already $14,400. Enough for a reliable used car, a down payment in some parts of the country, or a sizable investment portfolio. And that's assuming companies never raise prices. Which, let's be honest, has about the same chance as airline food winning a Michelin star. But subscriptions have another superpower. They remove what psychologists call the pain of paying. Whenever you physically hand over money, your brain notices. That's why paying cash often feels more painful than tapping your phone. Automatic payments remove that feeling entirely. You don't actively decide to spend money. It just happens, like magic. Except the magician is your bank account. And somehow, the disappearing act always involves your money. Now here's something most people never think about. Netflix isn't trying to make you watch more movies. Spotify isn't trying to make you listen to more songs. Adobe isn't trying to make you edit more photos. Their first goal is getting you to not cancel. That's a completely different business. Traditional businesses compete for purchases. Subscription businesses compete for time, because every extra month you stay makes you dramatically more profitable. Think of it like planting a tree. The hardest part isn't growing the apples, it's convincing someone to plant the tree in the first place. Once it's there, the harvest keeps coming. That's why companies spend enormous amounts of money convincing you to sign up. Free trials, student discounts, bundle deals, 3 months free, $1 for your first month, family plans, annual discounts. They're not being generous. They're investing because they know something incredibly important. Most people never cancel, not because they're happy, because they forget. Researchers studying consumer behavior have found that people consistently underestimate recurring expenses compared to one-time purchases. Not because they're bad at math, because recurring payments quietly become part of the background. They're no longer decisions, they're habits, and habits are incredibly difficult to notice. It's like living next to a train track. Eventually, you stop hearing the trains, even though they're still passing every single day. Subscriptions work exactly the same way. Your brain filters them out. Your bank account doesn't, and companies know this better than anyone. Ever noticed how incredibly easy it is to start a subscription, but canceling sometimes feels like escaping a maze? Are you sure? Would you like 50% off? What if we pause instead? Would another free month change your mind? At this point, canceling a subscription can feel like trying to break up with someone who refuses to accept the relationship is over. No, it's okay. We can make this work. No, we can't. But here's the twist. Subscriptions themselves aren't actually the villain. Some subscriptions genuinely save people money. Others provide tremendous value. The real problem isn't the monthly payment, it's something much bigger. Because over the last decade, subscriptions quietly stopped being products and started becoming the foundation of the modern economy. And once Wall Street realized just how valuable recurring revenue really was, every company, from software to coffee, cars to razors, started chasing the exact same dream. Not selling you something once, but owning a tiny piece of your paycheck every single month. And that's where the story takes an even stranger turn. Here's something that would have sounded ridiculous 20 years ago. Today, some people wake up, and before they've even brushed their teeth, they've already spent money. Not because they bought anything, because subscriptions kept running while they were asleep. Netflix renewed, cloud storage renewed, AI tools renewed, music renewed. It's like hiring 20 tiny accountants whose only job is to quietly remove money from your account every month. They're extremely efficient. Unfortunately, they all work for someone else. And this is exactly why Wall Street loves subscription businesses. Not because they're trendy, because they are predictable. Predictable revenue makes companies easier to value, easier to borrow against, easier to expand, and easier to convince investors that next year's revenue is already on the way. That's why investors often reward recurring revenue businesses with higher valuations than businesses that rely on one-time sales. To an investor, recurring customers can look more valuable than constantly finding new ones. Then something interesting happened. The subscription model escaped software. It spread everywhere: cars, food, even printers. Some printers literally refuse to print if your subscription expires. Imagine buying a toaster, and one morning it says, "Bread detected. Unfortunately, your premium toast trademark membership has ended." Ridiculous, maybe, impossible, not anymore. The goal quietly changed. Companies stopped asking, "How can we build the best product?" and started asking, "How can we stay between the customer and their paycheck?" That's a completely different business strategy. Now, before everyone cancels every subscription they own, let's be fair. Subscriptions aren't evil. In many cases, they're fantastic. Spotify gives millions of songs for less than the cost of one album. Netflix is cheaper than buying every movie individually. Cloud storage protects priceless photos. AI tools can save hours every week. Some subscriptions genuinely create far more value than they cost. That's not the problem. The problem is something much simpler. People rarely ask one question. Would I buy this again today? Because once a payment becomes automatic, it stops competing with other purchases. It becomes invisible. And invisible spending is the most dangerous kind of spending. Here's a small experiment. Open your banking app. Scroll through the last 3 months. Count every recurring payment. Not just the big ones, the tiny ones too. $4.99, $7.99, $11.99. Now add them together. Most people are shocked, not because the number is enormous, but because they never realized it was there. It's financial dust. One grain doesn't matter, but enough dust. And eventually you can't see the floor. The companies aren't hiding these payments. They're simply relying on something incredibly human. We adapt. What once felt like a luxury soon feels like a necessity. Yesterday's convenience becomes today's expectation. And tomorrow's expectation becomes a permanent monthly expense. That's how lifestyles inflate. Not through one massive purchase, but through hundreds of tiny decisions nobody remembers making. Remember how this video started? We used to buy things. Now, we rent them. But ownership didn't disappear overnight. It disappeared one monthly payment at a time, one free trial, one discount, one cancel anytime, one only $9.99, until eventually, owning became the exception, and subscribing became the default. The subscription economy isn't making people poor because every subscription is expensive. It's making people poor because it teaches us to stop noticing money leaving our lives. And the moment you stop noticing where your money goes, someone else starts deciding where it ends up. That's the real product being sold. Not movies, not music, not software. Predictability. Predictable revenue for companies. Predictable spending from you. So next time you see a button that says, "Start your free trial," don't ask yourself, "Can I afford $9.99 a month?" Ask a much better question. If this wasn't a subscription, would I still buy it? Because sometimes the smartest financial decision isn't finding another investment. It's simply canceling the ones you stopped using months ago. If you want to better understand the hidden forces shaping your money, from investing and psychology to the business models quietly changing the economy, consider subscribing. Because the biggest financial stories are rarely the loudest ones. They're usually the ones hiding in plain sight.